All through that interview, I kept thinking of The Godfather. You know that scene in the film where he wakes up with a horse's head in the bed next to him? You don't think Gwyn sleeps with his horse's head, do you? Best not to think about it. Have a cup of tea. See you in part 2. Welcome back. If I was to say to you, greatest love story in Welsh history, you'd probably say, who cares? Or you might say, Burton and Taylor, or even Henson and Church. But neither of those relationships has had a very beautiful and very famous song written about it. So, greatest love story in Welsh history? Hopkin and Thomasman. And it happened here, in Llangynwyd. The song was written by Will Hopkin himself, in one of the bedrooms of this very pub, according to legend, and Bagailiwr Gwenith Gwyn, harvesting the white wheat, was inspired by a love story so tragic it makes Romeo and Juliet look like an episode of Men Behaving Badly. Love the hats.
When she was coming up to 18, she fell in love with the local tiler, Will Hopkin. Her mother was against this marriage because there was another farm on the other side of the hill, Cwmbriska, where there was a young lawyer and his father and family living. And she wanted to combine the two farms into one. And eventually she agreed to get married to Anthony Maddox, the young lawyer. Right. And she was married in Llangynwyd Church in 1725.
The relationship was a turbulent one. And if this fly-on-the-wall documentary footage is to be believed, and it isn't, Maddox was a violent alcoholic who wouldn't share the booze with his wife. 2 years later, Anne was dead. She was buried in the family vault of the chancel of Llangynwyd Church. Will Hopkin never married and died 14 years later to be buried in the graveyard outside the church, so they're still not together. Anthony Maddox married again a few months later to another young heiress, and Anne's mother, in many ways the cause of all the trouble, was booted out of what had once been her own home. And in the road between the church and the pub stands the memorial to all this misery. That's enough sex. Let's move on 100 years for some violence. By now, the Llynwy is a mining valley, and the favourite sport of the tough guys working there is boxing.
One of our oldest customers, Mr. Llangynwyd, was a former Welsh champion, right, and also British champion blacksmith. Glyn still comes here now a couple of times a week.
Well, Glyn, you have 2 claims to fame, so let's take them one at a time. You were a Welsh champion flyweight boxer, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. When was that?
1950.
And you fought George Sutton, wasn't it?
That's right. I fought 4 times.
4 times.
And I beat him 3 out of 4. And he beat me in the end and returned the title.
Oh, right. So you got the championship from him and then he got it back from you?
That's it.
How did you become a boxer?
Well, I started going to the boxing gym, you know, as a young lad, didn't it? I must have been about 12.
Oh, very young then?
And started boxing there, taking some bumping, mate.
Aye.
And I went to Cardiff to the national championship, the amateur championship,
yeah,
which I won for 3 fights the same night. And I got the wallet here now with the date on it.
Yeah.
If you can have a look at it there.
That was the prize?
That was the prize.
3 fights in one night?
3 fights in one night.
They wouldn't do that now, would they?
No, I don't think so.
You must have been phenomenally strong.
And I was a very robust fighter, you know. I got disqualified a few times.
Why was that?
Well, barging in, collision of heads. And
mucking about.
I turned professional then when I was 16.
Oh.
Might as well fight for money as for tin cans. And I had £2.10 shillings for the first fight. And my wages as apprentice blacksmith were 10 shillings a week. So I had 5 weeks' wages in one night.
And the second thing that you're famous for is that you're a British champion blacksmith, aren't you? Tell us about that.
Well, I used to go to the shoeing competitions years ago, you know, competing against the best in the country. Went to the Royal Show for the national championship, and I had no idea that I was going to win it, but I did win it, didn't I?
You beat the best?
Beat the Queen's blacksmith for the championship.
Fantastic. And what did you actually have to do to win?
Well, I had to make 3 horseshoes in 65 minutes. Right. And believe me, what a go.
And you've been to America about 10 times, am I right?
Around about that.
Yeah.
Giving demonstrations and clinics there.
To cowboys?
Yeah, and the
People
cowboys, you know. I remember when I got off the plane from Albuquerque in New Mexico.
Yeah.
This big cowboy there, he's about 6'4". He said, "I'm a blacksmith," he said. "He's too small to be a blacksmith." But when he seen me work, he had to eat his words.
I want to ask you about the thatch roof now.
Oh, it's got to be done this year.
Is this year, is it?
It's got to be done this year. We've got to put a new thatch in this year.
How long's it been up?
This one hasn't been up that long. It's only been up 1981. The wrong reeds were used. That's why it didn't last. It should last 35 to 40 years. But this has been in a terrible state now for the last 10 years.
Does it leak?
As bad as it is, it doesn't leak.
And the conservatory?
That leaks. That leaks.
Well, you should have had a thatched conservatory. You see,
No,
you'd been all right then.
if you notice all the jugs on the conservatory, they aren't for show. They're to catch the water and the leaks.
I want to ask you now about the whiskies, because Whiskey Pub of Britain 2001, you know, what did the Scots think about that?
They
The
were
best.
quite happy, actually. We had lots of feedback, and it appeared in... we've got some friends up in Scotland, and it was in a lot of the Scottish papers. And we had some nice phone calls and all that, you know. It was very good. The most expensive whiskey we had was Llangynwyd a tot. We still got some here now. It's a bare barley, and this gentleman has actually been to the pub. Would like a drop. This is...
No.
This is proper stuff.
No,
You don't need any water for this, believe me now.
No.
You try
No,
that.
no.
I'm not going to give you much at 11.50.
Thank you very
but You
much.
try that.
That's about... Well,
£3
that must be about...
worth.
Yeah.
So... Yeah, very good. Yeah, very good.
And after a stiff drink, a brisk walk with the local ramblers. They often start off at the old house and finish here too. Now, the 4 sevens on that badge, there's a story there. Apparently, years ago, a local stonemason was having a problem carving the figure 8 on the gravestone of someone who died at the age of 28. So he carved 4 sevens instead. 4 sevens, 28. It's a local legend, but is it true? Well, we looked in the graveyard, but we couldn't find it. Let's hope we have better luck today, because we're looking for another stone now. The Bodvik stone, said to show the place where a 6th century king was killed in battle. Cyril Phillips is still with me, and even though you can't see more than 20 yards, he assures me he'll have no trouble at all finding the stone. Well, not only have we lost the ramblers, but we can't find the Bodvik stone either. But it doesn't really matter, because it's not the real stone. The original is in Margam Stone Museum for safekeeping. Which does make me wonder how many other Welsh monuments have been replaced with cheap imitations. Is Carnarvon Castle the real thing? Or is it a fake Carnarvon Castle made of balsa wood? Next time you're there, give it a push. See if it wobbles. So, Cyril, how do we get out of this then?
Well, I think we'll have to go through the mist in this direction.
OK, let's go this way. The ramblers found the stone and took this photo. It's quite small. Maybe the 6th century king was a midget. Which is not how you describe Little Richard. Richard?
Yes.
Little Richard?
Indeed.
You're a big lad to be Little Richard.
Yeah, that's quite right.
Well, the future is in your hands. What plans do you have?
Obviously, I'd like to uphold, the good food and fine ale that my grandparents and parents have started serving here.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, things like the thatch that needs to be renewed.
Yeah.
And then just general expansion in the food sort of industry rather than drink, because pubs are in decline, as we all know.
And also, I noticed that you've got a children's party here.
Yes, a very child-friendly environment here, family-orientated, There's
And
a child's play area at the back there as well.
Next to the helicopter landing
Next to the
pad.
helicopter landing pad, that's right, yes.
Children, don't play on the
Yeah,
helicopter.
no, whatever you do.
Any other ideas? I mean, what you described are things you're already doing and doing well, so carry on doing that. But anything else? Anything new? Lap dancing? I know it's very
Maybe,
popular.
You never know, that room doesn't get used a lot.
Well, let's bring your dad in and see what he thinks. Big Richard, do you think the future is safe in Little Richard's hands?
I don't think lap dancing would go in Llangynwyd.
Oh.
I think the vicar would have a lot to say about that, and the local clergy, so I think we
Right.
better do what we've been doing good for the last 40 years.
I can't see myself being in the bar for another 40 years, but
Well,
certainly in the
there'll
next
be-
15, 20
there'll
years.
There'll be more Richards on the way, I'm sure.
Well, not at the moment, no current plans.
Well, he's a handsome big lad. Ladies, if you're watching this programme, and obviously he's available.
What about his father?
Oh, and his father's in the market as well. There we are. Brilliant.
Thank you very much,
Richard?
Little John.
Don't rub it in. So there's not going to be lap dancing here. The vicar can relax. but I should think that traditional music like Aderyn Pier, The Gentle Dove, would go down very well. This was written by a local man, David Nicholas, who used to run the school at Llangynwyd. Aye, they've had some talented composers round here, what with Will Hopkin as well. Now, what to put in the postcard home? Well, if you like jugs, this is definitely the pub for you, although they're obviously there to be looked at, not handled. And if you're romantically inclined, then the tragic love story of Will Hopkin and Anne Thomas is right up there with Mills and Boon. But if, like me, or like me, you'll prefer something a bit more knockabout, like the Mary Lloyd, and I do like the extreme antiquity of that tradition. So add all that to a well-kept pint and good food, and you've got what's truly a great pub of Wales. I now have one final task to complete, and then, well, I'll have another pint in it. And then maybe another one after that. Job done. Lovely.